Good evening to all and a very warm welcome to our distinguished speakers this evening. Welcome to the first of a series of webinars on the silver economy by the INSEAD Alumni Association of France to be hosted over the course of 2021. I am Krish Buchet, INSEAD Alumni MBA 07, and I'm joined by Sophie Schmitt of Seniosphere. Good evening. And we shall be your moderators for this evening. As this is our very first webinar on the topic, I believe an introduction to the topic is in order. What is the silver economy? The silver economy is defined as the economic opportunities arising from the public and consumer expenditure related to population aging and the specific needs of the population over 50. Now, it's probably worth at this juncture to give you some background as to who we are and what has inspired us to start this club. So I'm going to let Sophie do her introduction first.
Yes, thank you, Krish. Like Obelix fell into the magic potion when he was little, I fell into the senior potion very early because I started at L'Oréal in 1992 and I launched the first L'Oréal brand targeting seniors in 1993. So this is from the very beginning of my career, I started working on seniors. After this, I had an international career at L'Oréal, at McDonald's and Coca-Cola. And then back to France when I came, I started Seniosphere consultancy in 2006 to help companies size the opportunity with this growing market. Back there in 2006, it was a niche market, very small market. But today I could say that it's like a big amusement park where we really enjoy working. Our clients belong to all sectors, such as bank, insurance, distribution channels, fast-moving consumer goods, service, and obviously health. And I'm also an expert at the European Commission on several projects, namely at the DG Connect at the EU. And what about you, Krish?
Well, I'm a post-merger integration specialist. What am I doing here, right? Well, about 2 years ago, I discovered the silver economy due to a very personal experience of mine. And the more I researched the topic, the more I realized how important it was, particularly from an M&A perspective. And true enough, I discovered how fragmented this economy is, which means there is room for consolidation. And in fact, the more I dug, the more I found out about what some of what the private equities are doing, what institutional investors are doing in this space. And I began to realize that this is a space that, even though it's in its infancy stages, that it has potential to grow. The M&A activity has quite a lot of potential to grow. And if you take companies such as La Poste, and today we have Delphine and Mallet of La Poste here, companies such as La Poste are choosing to change and diversify their company strategy to invest and develop by deploying strategies such as a buy and build strategy to take advantage of this huge potential. And that's one of the reasons why Delphine Mallet is here today, in fact, and she's going to talk a little bit about her company strategy today. So what are we hoping to achieve through this club? I mean, Sophie and myself. First of all, we would like to create increased awareness and better understanding of the potential of the longevity economy in order to facilitate the development of products and services in the sector and bring about increased collaboration among the various actors by creating opportunities for them to meet and exchange views in order to discover business opportunities. Now, I think the second objective will take a while due to COVID restrictions, but we're building up to it. So that's going to come sooner or later. Now, before we go any further, I'm just going to very quickly run through some house rules for today's webinar. This is probably more for the participants on the call. You will all notice that you've been muted. So But there is a way to communicate with us, and you would do that by in fact, clicking on the Q&A box that I believe on the bottom of the Zoom window that you've got, and you can type in any questions you like into the Q&A box. And myself and Sophie, who are the moderators for today, we will pick up the questions, we will vet the questions, and we will add them. We will ask the speakers to address the questions. So those are just some housekeeping rules. Next up, I'm going to hand the floor to Sophie for a couple of minutes, and she's going to set the scene for today's webinar before we move on to the speakers and hear their views. So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you. So I hope that all of you can see my screen. You might have realized that the topic of today is unlocking the fastest growing, most misunderstood market. So, and I'm going to explain you why we choose this name for this first webinar through a couple of insights about the longevity economy. First thing I'm going to talk about is the demography. Why we call it the fastest growing market. This is something which the story I'm going to tell you started right after the World War II in 1950.
Le micro est coupé.
List on the bottom, you have the age of the people from 0 to 100 years old. And you have the number of people who had that age in the 1950s. What you see is you have very, very few people above the age of 80. You have a fair share of people above 50. And that you could see that there was the start of what we call the baby boom with an increasing number of births. So we are going to move up until 2020 to see how this changed. So 1950, this is how the demography was. 1960, you see an increase in the births, 1970. And then from 70 on, we reached the peak of the births and of the baby boom. And we moved in a totally different situation. Let's move up until 2020, 1980, 1990, 1920. Here is where we are today. In 2020, we have reached the peak of the people who are in their 50s. Look at how many people we have above the age of 50 and above the age of 80. And don't expect these waves to stop. This is going to move further up until the end, because we have a life expectancy about around the age of 85 today, something like this in Europe. So we're still going to be an increasing number of people in their 80s. Another thing is that you see that we have less people, less births, and there is a kind of discrepancy or disbalance between the older people, the 50 plus and the 50 minus. So this was the first thing I wanted to share with you. It's a fast growing market because of this trend of the baby boom. And one thing you have to have in mind, and this is why we call it a longevity economy, is that it's a matter of number of births, but it's a matter of life expectancy as well, which has increased by 14% over the last 50 years. And today at 50, you are expected to live 35 more years. So this is the situation and the reason why we call it fast growing market in Europe. But don't consider that it's only Europe who is concerned by this, because if you look at all these other countries like China, Brazil, or Italy and Japan, you see that in 2020, this is today, you have roughly almost half of the population who is above the age of 50 in Italy and Japan. These are the oldest countries in the world. And we have a kind of average country, France, UK, Canada, who have roughly 40% of the population above the age of 50. And you have the young countries such as Brazil or China. But it's not going to remain like this, because when you look in 2030, the weight is going to increase in all countries around the world, and especially increasing in China and Brazil. And towards 2050, look at China. China will have overpassed France, UK, and US in the weight of the 50 plus. So China is becoming and aging extremely rapidly because of the one-child policy. Same things happening with Brazil. Look at how the situation have changed. And obviously, we still remain with the oldest countries such as Japan and Italy, who are a bit further than this. So the market is growing fast and is going to grow faster in the year to come, especially among the 70 plus or even the 80 plus people. Why do we call it the most misunderstood? One of the reasons is that, and I like this comic for this, is that this cartoon tells us something. They have a large buying power, and marketer seems to ignore most of the people above the age of 35. This we have seen. Also, it's changing. This is still the case, and this is something we need to address, and we might be speaking about this later. Why it's a most misunderstood market? Because it's a complex market. It's complicated. First thing, and I hear this question very often, when do you become a senior? Very often when people ask this question, they are kind of afraid and very stressed about the answer because they don't want to be considered a senior. So I'm not going to tell you that you're a senior tonight, because to this question, I can answer it depends. It depends on the sector, it depends on the product, it depends on the country. So this is something you need to address when you talk about this longevity economy, but there is not one single answer to this. The second thing is that, should I consider age as a key criteria to assess senior needs? And the answer is no. No, because there are a lot of differences even at the same age, and I would really advise you not to do this. What I would consider as being relevant to consider these seniors is more to pay attention to life stages, where they are, their generation. You have today 3 generations who are in this senior group, like above 50. You have the silent generation, which was born before World War II. You have the baby boomer, and that's the largest group of the seniors today. And you have the Gen X, because Gen X now are over the age of 50, from 50 to 56, and they have joined this group as well. And the third thing you should pay attention to is the health, because obviously this is really what will help you or determine what the people is able to do. So just to give you an insight on how complex this market is that it's far from being homogeneous. You might have the working seniors on one side, which are late baby boomer and Gen X, and who have some very specific needs, different from the active retirees who are baby boomers currently. And you have the frail retiree, who belongs mainly to silent generation, and what we call the oldest old, who are from the silent generation as well. And obviously each of them have some different needs, some different expectation, some different culture, because baby boomer have a totally different culture from the silent generation. So these are information you need to take into account when you think of the senior market or the longevity market, and so you really need to pay attention to all these elements, and it makes it quite complicated. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is one thing is that there is different opportunities according to sectors. Just looking at France, currently, people 55 plus account for 33% of the French population. But when you look at the expenditure of the 55 plus, they account to 59% of the home services. And this is one of the reasons we invited tonight Damien from We Care to talk about this. They account for 48% of the food expenditure, 43% of the health expenditure. And I know that Delphine is going to talk about home services and health tonight. Then you have the leisure, which is less than this, 39%, but above their share in the population. And then the last thing, maybe the lowest one, are the phones. 18% of the phones are or 80% of the value of the expenditure regarding phones are paid by the 50 plus. And then Yannick will tell us about this again. So this is what I wanted to share with you about this opportunity and this market.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That was pretty comprehensive. That was pretty comprehensive information. Now let's move on to our speakers for the evening. First up, we have Delphine Mallet, who is the CEO of the Home Care and Healthcare Business Unit, Le Groupe La Poste. Delphine was appointed Director of Silver Economy Services in 2015, and she's also a member of the Executive Committee of the Mail and Parcels Services Division. As the chairwoman of the holding companies La Poste Silver and La Poste Santé, she leads La Poste's diversification strategy into these sectors. She's also vice chairman of the Silver Economy Sector Committee, a certified IFA Sciences Co director. She's also a director and a treasurer of the Fondation Partage et Vie. And without further ado, let me invite Delphine to share with you her take on the silver economy.
Thank you very much, Krish, and hi, everyone. First of all, as Sophie mentioned, the longevity economy covers so many market segments because it's supposed to be everything that can be bought by people over 60, that your first job in the longevity economy will always be to categorize and size your target. It's basic marketing. At La Poste, we have chosen to target young seniors and fragile seniors, and certainly not dependent seniors. Those two segments we have chosen are also the two segments that have the strongest quantitative push in the next 10 years. The baby boomers, it's this age range. We at La Poste focus on every service at home that will help maintain autonomy and prevent dependency, especially considering that in France, contrary to other countries, day-to-day services for prevention of dependency are scarce. This has also brought a strong interest for us on healthcare, because health is really linked to longevity. And now our major diversification stream is concerning logistics for medical devices at home and digital health. We started with the longevity theme, and we ended up focusing on healthcare and bringing people back from the hospital and at home. Longevity can only be considered a privilege if a majority of the elderly population is active and in good health. Because life expectancy is rising, Sophie mentioned it, but what's really important is life expectancy in good health. In France, we are very good in life expectancy, but we're not very good in being very old and in good health at the same time. So dependency is, of course, mostly due to age-related diseases. But the second cause is frailty that can be worked on through prevention. And the third cause is inactivity, or more generally, lifestyle. Most diseases have modifiable risk factors and can be addressed through prevention. Prevention that must be started as soon as 40 to 50 years old. And it's never too late. 50% of the current dependency in France could be avoided. This is a battle La Poste is willing to wage. It's more in line with our assets, and it's a noble purpose. And you need both to succeed in business diversification, which is the path we have chosen through organic growth and external growth. We try to balance our investment in mature business line And also, and at the same time, we do capital risk in startups because the business models for the future are still to be determined in some areas, such as coordination services or return from hospital services, everything that's aiming at making a senior's journey, a patient's journey easier is a need, but it's not really working today in France. So we try and focus on capital risk investment and helping new models to spread in France. You also want to rely in the longevity sector on partners. You know, usually you focus on what you can do and gain more market share, but you also need to rely on partners that will help you provide customers with a wider range of services. Many competitors in the longevity sector are also partners, which I think is a specificity. The major objective in partnership is to lower the access cost to the senior customer. Plus, the challenge is that every product that's obviously designed for seniors, for old age, is quite repulsive. Young seniors don't see themselves as old. Old seniors are not so easily influenced by their family nowadays. So most specific products are niche products in reality, where it's difficult to make them profitable if you address directly the end consumer market, because distribution cost will be too high. That's why many startups have a hard time rising and surviving. If you want to go for a very specific product, your best choice would normally be to target the B2B market addressing seniors, like retirement homes, for instance, and you start there and you make your product now, and then you can go directly to the customer market. So that's the path most startups tend to choose nowadays. And if you still want to target the senior consumer market, in the end, our experience is that success will be based on how you empower the senior. They decide. The central question to be able to sell something in the longevity sector, because many of us have come with wonderful products, but nobody buys them. It's rarely, is there a need or a pain point that my product or service is going to address? Because that's quite easy to find solutions, theoretical solution. It's rather, is there enough value in my services that someone is ready to pay for it? That's also why non-professional caregivers, mostly family, are targeted by marketers for longevity services because they seem to be an easier target to sell something to, mostly because they feel responsibility about their elderly. Something that might help, and that's the path we've chosen, is to prove the medical value in avoiding a percentage of dependency. For instance, we tend to focus more and more on services for health that have their own regulated business model through government and healthcare system. And today at La Poste, we have doctors and nurses, and we drive clinical studies that will prove in 2 or 3 years that digital medicine and prevention services create efficiency in our healthcare system, and that they can at last be considered as an investment for the future, our future, economically, medically, and sociologically, because what you bring to your seniors is a strong mark of what society you're building.
Thank you very much, Delphine, for that. That was a very, very interesting take. I mean, I must say, I love La Poste's strategy to be able to take one of your core strengths, which is your logistics capabilities, and to use that to try and do something in a market that is growing at breakneck speed, to do something for the society that, and yet be profitable. That's a brilliant strategy. And I dare say, from my experience, I haven't seen many companies that have been able to take one of their core strengths and and take advantage of it in a very different segment. And this is really, really very interesting. And I particularly also think that you've given quite a lot of entrepreneurs out there, quite a lot of some really, really good advice. What came to my mind as you were talking about prevention services, it's, you know, it's really funny. I used to work in Rolls-Royce, which is the company that builds aircraft engines. And, you know, we were the pioneers in preventive maintenance. And it's funny, it's a concept that we deployed. It's a concept that we deployed first for machines before it came around to us, before we came around to deploying it on ourselves.
Exactly.
Thank you, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. Sophie, anything to add to that?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce you to Damien Cacaret, Directeur délégué aux activités seniors, Groupe Oui Care, a doctor of pharmacy and graduate of HEC. Damien Cacaret is an established entrepreneur and expert in the home care sector, a sector in which he has specialized in over the last 15 years. In 2004, he founded the Domidom brand, which he later sold to the Orpea Group in 2015 before joining the latter to manage their Adap Domidom subsidiaries. In 2019, he joined the Oui Care Group to orchestrate the strategy for seniors and support the development of the brands in the field of home care targeted at preserving and reinforcing personal autonomy. Over to you, Damien.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Krish, for this introduction. And thank you, Sophie and Delphine also. It was very interesting to hear from you. For me, the adventure started in 2002. I was almost 20 years old, and France just made one of the first reforms in the medical social sector, actually to cope with the increasing need for assistance and services for the elderly. And it's actually at that moment, I became interested in the home care services market. And it's this political situation that alerted me and pushed me to embark upon this market. At that time, I was still pushing my entrepreneur major at HEC. I'm sorry, nobody is perfect. We were at that moment all very pioneer in this sector in creating private structure focused on the needs and also on the desire of people, because the market at that moment was mainly provided by non-profit association structure, and so not really on the professional way and highly fragmented. And that's why in 2004 I founded my own company to really put the customer inside the services, which at that moment was quite different. Now, as you said, Krish, I just a couple of months ago joined the We Care group, which is quite involved in the sector. Is playing a role in the restructuring of the market by grouping together one of the leading brands in the market through external and organic growth, which we have both strategy inside the group. And so we have brands like O2, APF, or France Présence, for example, that work with elderly especially, and other brands who work, I'm not going to speak about that, work on the other market of home care services, which is cleaning, kids care, or things like that. But we have more than 500 agencies, 80,000 employees around all the company for a business volume of 300 million euro. The share of the senior citizen market has been growing strongly for the past year, which is now representing more than 35% of our business. And it's keep on growing year by year, as I told you, because we have external growing and also our organic growth, because the demand is growing a lot. I'm not going to repeat what Sophie already said and show with the graph and the tsunami that's coming with the baby boomer. So with our brands, we cover the entire home care services for elderly market. That means that we have few competition, internal competition. We offer complement each other to help at the meantime, the young, what we call the active senior, enjoying their life with well-being, leisure activities and things like that. And also we are on the dependent senior to age well at home with home care services, nursing and cares and things like that. So we can say that we try to go on all the services that the senior needs, from the young senior to the dependent senior. We also now, as the group is quite important in France, we tried also to have a international expanding, and we already have a brand in Spain, for example, and in Portugal, which is called Interdomicilio, who's also focused on the elderly market. And also, we are in the group, we try to, and I'm going to explain that a little after, but we try to create new activities for the new demands and the new needs of the senior, only on the services way, of course. So everybody can see that France has been hedging for several decades, which is both an opportunity and also a threat for our country, and especially in the in-home care services. That's what I'm going to explain for a few moments. For the opportunities, the senior brings a lot to our countries and to our society, a social and economic wealth. And this segment of the population is a higher level of income and also saving the rest, saving more than the rest of the population. So senior are already and will become the major consumer. But the new generation of seniors, which called the baby boomer, are going to accelerate consumption because they are going to grow in number, but also because they want to enjoy the golden years of their life. This is a generation, and I'm playing to say that this generation that no longer just want to add year to their life, but life to these years. So then this generation wants to life, and they don't want to wait for the year passing. So that's very important to have this in mind for our services and to adapt the services to this generation. So our organizations must transform themselves in order to meet these new demands that I'm saying in numbers, but also in quality way. So in our company services model, it's no longer a question of, for example, a couple of years ago, when I started to work with my first company, for example, I'm taking an example of a meal for a grandmother. 20 years ago, we were delivering a meal. And now we are thinking of bringing the grandma a pleasure by cooking her favorite dish, which is two things completely different. And it's really the way that we have to think now the services to be completely in front of this new demand. So the challenge, we have many challenges, but the most important challenges for our companies now are, as I said, transforming our service offer to be closer to our consumer expectation. And also, one second to, which is essential to our services model, it's the employees. So we call them the caregivers or the carekeepers. There are different way to call it in France and in English also. But without them, we are not able to face the evolution of the market. So it's more than necessary once to attract and to retain and to train our staff. And that's very, very important because there is a need to attract new talent of the sector to cope with growing demand and also aging employee population. Because to this point, especially, employees in home care services differ from the rest of the employees population. For example, give you an example, they are older on average, 48 years old compared to 41 years for the rest of the population, the active population. So that means that we have really to deal with a large number of retirements and also to adapt the mission for all employees. Because when you have 50 or 55 years old and you had to every day to go to help a old grandma, old grandpa, which is quite heavy, for example, to help him to work, to walk, to dress in the morning, to carry the shopping, I don't know, every day. It's quite difficult for our employees. So we have to adapt the missions of our employees. We're going to get older and older also, which is important things to have in mind when you work on this sector. Also, it is also necessary to develop and upgrade the skills also of the employees to meet new and evolution needs, as I explained just now. So the silver economy is therefore a real opportunity for innovation, for employment, of course, and for investment also in our French companies, which the growth potential to add significant value. Now, if I'm going to the streets, because also the market can be in difficulty fast to this evolution of the population. The biggest risk is the financial of dependency care in France, because first of all, the old age policies are lagging far behind in our country, completely. For the for the past 20 years, we have been making small and non-structural reforms that we had to do. Most of our neighbors in Europe, for example, Germany or Spain, they have already carried out a major reform in order to anticipate the financial needs of their aging population. And now France, our country, has really back on the wall, and we have to do the reforms probably faster, and because we have to do it, and we have to be face of that. So it's really important to have a reform, structural reform now in the sector. Just a couple of examples just to be in front of that. In France, 2 years ago, 1% of the GDP was allocated to financial dependency, which was 24 billion euro. In 2060, without reform, it will be 35 billion will be required. So we have to find this money to be fast to the dependent population. Our country is, as I said already, is back to the wall with a number of dependent persons, will be doubling by 2040 from 1.3 million to 2.7 million. And also, the burden will be spread over fewer and fewer working people. So that's also important. The aging of the population, as I said, it's a real tsunami. It won't be restricted to our country's finance. So we have to take really care of that in the not in 20 years, but it's now that we have to do it. We should have done it before, so we have to say. But something comes good, because I think that if we focus on what had happened a couple of months ago, the current health crisis is accelerating the timetable for our reforms. In August 2020, a law just set up a system for financial social debt, which has largely been affected by the epidemic. And this text allowed the creation of a new social risk, security risk, which dedicated to dependency, and its organization within fifth risk, or we call it the dependent risk. This is an important first step, I think, for us, because it gives us actually visibility, and we hope to also erase the territorial differential that we can find in our home care assistance sector. It's not good, but today we can say that it's in some sector, in some territory in France, we take more care, financially speaking, of the elderly people than another department. So I think that has to be erased completely, and probably with this fifth risk, dependency risk, we can go to that. We hope also that it will enable us to advance the principle of the social security, which is the same right for all everywhere, and therefore more equity in access to services and benefits. Thank you.
Damien. Thank you. That was very comprehensive. And it is, you know, I must say, as someone who invested in a pair of glasses a couple of years ago, because I'm long-sighted now, but I've not yet hit the age mark of 50, I'm glad to say. You know, when I'm not thinking about the huge financial dependencies and the burden that's going to put on the economy, I am indeed thinking about my quality of life. And it's definitely very reassuring to hear players such as We Care, for example, you know, already thinking about what they can do to make sure that those of us who are in the senior economy, can continue to enjoy a great quality of life. It's great to have someone else do the thinking for us. But of course, I mean, I think given the potential of the market, I think there's a lot of thinking that a lot of people can do. If we all put our heads together, I think this is something that we can create something really very interesting in the silver economy. Thank you very much, Damien. Sophie, would you like to add anything else?
No, that's fine. I think we can give the floor to Yannick.
Yannick, yes. So let me very quickly introduce Yannick. Yannick, a true proponent of technology, a graduate of IAE Paris 1, and a product marketing director and head of anticipation projects for the senior domain. Yannick has managed multidisciplinary teams implementing Internet of Things services, big data solutions, and working with startups with the objective of creating senior-friendly technology aimed at enabling the independence and comfort of seniors at home for as long as possible. Yannick, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So, as you know, in fact, Orange is a pretty big company, and we are definitely positioning inside many countries into the world. So we can't talk about Africa, which is more a youth continent. It's pretty difficult to talk about Middle East as well, as it's also a young countries. And clearly in Europe, we've got two approaches, which are two really different approaches, the European and the Western Europe, just for a question of revenue. So let's just focus on the Western Europe, and then I'll tell you why, in fact, there are some discrepancies, and you would see it's pretty obvious with the Eastern Europe. So if we are talking about Western Europe, so for around is Benelux, France, and Spain, definitely we are talking about what Damien called the fifth risk. This is something, in fact, we are trying to endorse since years now through digital capabilities. So clearly, the first thing is because we are connecting people, and we are connecting people in each house or most of the house inside Europe. We are trying to bring some new help to this old person with this change, this digital change. So it's obvious, but it's pretty simple. When you have a classical phone and then you need to turn to switch to a smartphone, something is new. Something is not obvious, in fact, to touch and to deal with. Even if after a few weeks to get access to WhatsApp, to Facebook, etc., it's pretty well accepted. But in the meantime, we need to go step by step. So it means that if we want, in fact, to be a bit innovative when it's about elderly people and elderly market, we need to think as a digital company with at least three key pillars. The first one is conception. When we are making the conception of a product or a service, we need to think it globally. Globally means globally for a territory perspective, but also for a customer perspective, saying that for a customer, we've got two kinds of customer, the helpee and the helper. So the old person and his family or private helpers. Then we need also to think about the way we distribute the product. Do we need to distribute it through a web canal or to a digital canal or to a physical canal? So it means that we need to train people or sales team a bit differently. We need, in fact, to create new way, in fact, to demonstrate the added value of the product. And then after, the third pillar is the infrastructure. Because clearly, when we are talking about digital things, we need to talk about infrastructure. And through this, we can make the link between B2B, B2C, and also to spread it into different markets inside Europe. I said just Europe because we've got the RGDP, which is solid enough, in fact, to limit the access. But clearly, we just need to think about it. So clearly, this is one of the key things we need to have in mind. Third pillar we still need to think about is the financial part. The financial part, because the minimum value, in fact, we need to give a product could be different for a country to another. Means that for the retired person, the money and allocate to this phone portion each month is different. For example, in Eastern Europe, in Moldova, spread €3 represent more or less 40, 50 euro in France. So from a pure conception product, if we need to have this product or service consumption, we need to think about this also and to take benefit of a global infrastructure to downsize the cost. If we are looking more about the French market, clearly, and it's what Damien said also just a few minutes ago, most of the things are spread by region or by department. And it's pretty difficult, in fact, and we are here, and we are really lucky because La Poste, Oui Care are a global company inside one single territory, which is France. But fact is that in France, the different departments and regions are acting differently when it's about financing this elderly stuff. So it's a bit complex if we need to approach some CCIS, house of retirement, etc., because the submissions are not the same one. So we just need, in fact, to add each time, and this is what we've got inside Orange when it's about this innovation approach, is to think about something which could be affordable, which could represent added value for both the LP and the helper, and with two strong, for me, there is two strong value we need to demonstrate each time. It's to give, first thing is to give freedom to the LP, to the old person. This is for me really key, to let them live, because it's not because you are old that you can't live. You don't need, in fact, to be close into a retirement house, which is a place, in fact, which has been discovered by most of the French person and people during the first COVID crisis. Nobody, except the one we are already deeply engaged into this elderly activity, For the rest, nobody knows exactly how does it takes and how complex it is. And the second thing, in fact, we need to give, it's to the helpers, we need to give them time and reassurance. We need to give them confidence, and time is key. It's just to take a breath, because when you are taking care of an old person, definitely it's time consuming. It's some energy, in fact, you are spreading. So give them by a digital commitment, by a modelization of the habits, by risk analysis of the ways they are using their phone, because inside their phone we've got many ideas and many capabilities, but really just to bring them simplicity and freedom, really key. And clearly, the latest point I like, in fact, to share with you is pretty simple. It's really pragmatic and selfish. For sure, I'm a marketing guy. I made my study for marketing. I like marketing. Really, I eat and I dream marketing sometimes. But clearly, be pragmatic, be selfish. We need to be, when we are talking about longevity market, generally speaking, we need to be selfish. We need to think about us. Why? Just because it's pretty simple. We are all son or daughter of someone. So somewhere we are already an helper. And we are pretty sure to become an old person. So we are pretty sure to become an LP. So be selfish, prepare for future. It's so simple. And then you will see that which was the first, one of the first sentence, in fact, Sophie said, when it was about the average age of the marketer, about 35 years old. Definitely, yes, when we are 35, we are not thinking about this. We are not thinking about what will be the future. But now there is a market, and clearly this market means that we need to take care of it.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Some really good insights there into product design. Take into consideration, when you do product design, take into consideration developing something from a global perspective for the global market. But very importantly, there are two types of end users, the helpee and the helper. That's something I think everybody should remember when they're looking at product design in the silver economy. Now we're almost out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up soon, but not before we handle the question and answers that have come in.
There is a question to Delphine. How do you source the young startups you partner with or invest in? I guess someone is interested.
Yes.
It's a good thing.
Well, we actually, it's a day-to-day activity. For me and my team, me personally, and every member of my team, it's a rule we have that we spend at least 1/3 of our time in contact with all type of actors in our sectors, but mostly startups. And we do that through press releases, conferences, professional events. So we read press a lot, and we follow every investment news. We also track experimentation followed by hospitals with some startups. So we really are eager for any bit of information, and we usually get in touch with the startups. But of course, with time, we are lucky that some of them get in touch with us first. So it's a give and take thing, but mostly we do the job everyday focus.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Delphine. So is there a hotline, by the way?
There's always a hotline. In the longevity economy, there's always a hotline.
So, well, you know, that goes for Damien and Yannick as well. If there is a hotline, you can put it out there. No worries. And second question for, again, Delphine, how do the new initiatives from La Poste Silver Health integrate with the core business of La Poste? Where are the synergies?
Well, there's three kinds of synergies, basically. The first one would be a sales synergy, a distribution synergy, because we try and sell most of our new services line through our different medias and sales networks. The second would be logistics know-how. On some segments we have invested in, we have some logistics and organizing delivery matters. So we bring our knowledge to the small businesses that join the group. And the third one would be building a wide product range that enhances the value proposition of every service, because they are part of something bigger. And so we are matching and mixing historical assets of the group and new assets to be able to have a unique value proposition for the customers and for the hospitals and for everyone in the system we want to address.
Sounds like a plug and play option to me, actually, the last one.
Yes, that's the spirit.
Yes. And final question.
Maybe to Damien.
Yeah, perhaps to Damien. Do some of the services to seniors compete against public health services? How does one compete against state-subsidized offerings? You're on mute, Damien.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Actually, you have to, in France, you have to be clear of the different part of cure and care. I know that in foreigners' country, for example, in UK, it's the same envelope. You have cure and care services at the same time with the same service, with the same company, which can be private or public. But in France, it's quite separate. And that's important to have that in mind, because for the cure, of course, you have the public health, and you have a private company, private clinic who can give all the services that you need. On the care, it's also the same. You have the public services, which is actually, it's not really public. It's a non-profit association which is financed by the public, by the collectivity. Yannick said and speak about the department and the region, and it's mostly the department who's finance the non-profit association to give services, which is it's not against and it's not competitor, it's complementary with the other offer and the private offer. So I don't think you can speak of compete between against public and private service. It's really complementary, and we need the finance from the states, from the collectivity, from the department. But what we need to change, I think, it's the way how it's financed, because sometimes it's confused for the family, for the helpers, because the money don't get directly to actually what you need to the person. It goes through a company or through a non-profit association. So that, I think, can be confused, and that's why probably some people can think there is competition or we are against one to another solution. No, it's really complementary.
Thank you, Damien, very much. And in fact, I should have said earlier, I think the first question that was posed by Nicolas Schotter. The last two questions were by Charlie Be Good. And we have one final question, which is a rather interesting question. And I'll answer part of it. Are there any next steps in terms of the club? Yes, in fact, this is only the first step. This question was posed by Guido Filippo. And yes, indeed, this is the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be organizing. So yes, there is more to come, and we're going to touch on different subjects. We're going to touch on company strategy. We're going to touch on digital health and digital solutions, smart care homes. So in fact, there is scope for us to there is scope for us to touch every market segment that you can possibly imagine, because the silver economy touches basically everything. And the next question is, what is our plan to help connect with speakers and participants, create partnerships or business opportunities? Indeed, when Sophie and I came up with this club, this was very much the thinking behind it. In a non-COVID world, we would, all the participants, how many of you? 55 of you. Not joking, there are literally 55 participants today on the call. Would have had an opportunity to meet the likes of Damien, Yannick, and Delphine. And so definitely once COVID is over, when we start to organize conferences, live conferences, face-to-face conferences, there will be opportunity to get in touch with speakers and partners. And I think that's all. Is there anything else?
I have a question which was asked by Francisca Abad. I think it's for Yannick. To what extent the lack of digital competency is a barrier to access senior citizens? It is likely that boomers have been used to digital in a professional environment. What do you think about this, Yannick?
So you said something, I'm pretty sure, but honestly, I didn't get you well.
Okay, then I need to get it from here. Sorry, because, well, I need to read it from my computer. To what extent the lack of digital competency is a barrier to access senior citizens, and is it likely that boomers have been used to digital in a professional environment, and this might change the overall?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. The way, in fact, the boomers are working with computers and then are using smartphones change considerably the way, in fact, they interfere with all the digital stuff. It's more than that, it's about the global acceptation about what is really new and digital. So it can be a camera, it can be a watch, etc., etc. So definitely the way, in fact, they are working daily with a computer was the first step.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yannick. One question here from Nicolas Souli. Is there already a Facebook-like success for a startup in the US addressing this longevity market? Any transferable schemes? Not sure. Well, I don't know who to address this question to, but perhaps Yannick, are you in touch with what's happening in the US?
We've got some office into the US looking at new thing, startup and so on, such as we've got an office in Japan, etc., etc. But at this stage, it's really different of the market. After, it's just a question of opportunity and market sizing, in fact, to decide. But at this stage. In fact, this is just about a global evaluation first. I can't give you an answer right away like this.
What you might want to mention is that things are happening fast in the US on some market segments. So you have to check at what basically Google and Amazon are doing, and even Facebook, because they have initiative in terms of healthcare and sometimes senior markets. So that gives you an idea of what inspires them. And there's also in the US something very specific. That's the huge association, DRP, Association of American Retired People or something like that. That has dozens of millions of members and is a good way to start getting in touch with this specific segment. They also negotiate deals for their members. So that might be a good way to start.
Yeah.
It's a way, in fact, to work with a kind of union for sure. But I do think that in Europe, and specifically in France, we've got some law. We are give us some constraints to be in touch with them directly.
Okay, shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much for all the speakers. And once again, thank you very much to all our participants. And yes, watch your inbox. Watch your inbox because we will be sending out the next invite for the next webinar in a couple of weeks from now. Thank you very much, everyone. Sophie?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
for your contribution, for all your the information you shared about your company, which are quite interesting for our participants. Well, yes, we would have liked to see you, to feel you, to see you in front of next time, and I hope we can have you again on the next webinar. No, not webinar. That time on the next meeting, so that we can discuss around with a glass like we do in France. You know, after the professional meeting. And so see you all, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.